The world is divided into four spheres, each sphere divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Minds. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Chris Spanos. Coming up on the show, with U.S. backing, Saudi Arabia has been bombing Yemen since March 25th, sparking a humanitarian crisis. I'll speak with human rights defender Amaju Baraka about what's going on. But first, a look at how media reports on Latin America. The government of Ecuador released an official statement Sunday, March 22nd, refuting a story by news agency AFP, which published statements by President Rafael Correa alleging U.S. infiltration in a series of opposition protests. During his weekly presidential address, Correa mentioned the CIA while talking about marches carried out the previous Thursday in several Ecuadorian cities. According to the AFP, Correa said that the CIA had infiltrated the opposition-led protests. However, Ecuador's government said the president was addressing the documented role of the U.S. intelligence service in the country's affairs, as well as connections to opposition groups. On his Twitter account, Correa challenged the news agency's report. If the opposition marches had been organized by the CIA, they wouldn't have been such colossal failures, he tweeted. Despite continued efforts by the Ecuadorian opposition to foment dissatisfaction, a recent international survey conducted by the Association of Political Communication found that Correa enjoys a 79% approval rating, making him the world's second most popular leader. Saudi Arabia-led airstrikes have caused more than 100,000 Yemeni to flee their homes, according to UNICEF. Saudi Arabia launched their bombing campaign March 25th, after Houthi rebels seized state power in January. The Saudis claim they have legitimate regional security concerns since they share a border with Yemen. To help make sense of the crisis in Yemen, I've contacted Amaju Baraka. Hi Amaju, welcome to Imaginary Lines.
Thank you, my pleasure to be here.
You've written that the Saudi campaign in Yemen perpetuates lawlessness and chaos in the Middle East. What do you mean by this?
I mean that there's no basis in international law for the Saudi Arabian government to invade Yemen and to be engaged in military actions. Clearly, there is a situation in Yemen, a situation that appeared to be being worked out diplomatically. There was an agreement between the Houthi authorities and the U.S. For the U.S. to continue its role in Yemen, fighting al-Qaeda. There appeared to be some degree of order in the capital and in the country. But yet the Saudis decided that they were going to intervene militarily in order to reinstall President Hadi.
What role does the U.S. play in all of this?
Well, the U.S. is, through its own admission, is involved in providing support, logistical, intelligence. We know that that the Saudis don't have the capabilities to engage in the sophisticated targeting that's taking place in Yemen. And they also have admitted, that is the U.S., that they have established a joint coordinating office with the Saudis. So, for me, this indicates that while the Saudis are flying the planes, the U.S. supplied planes, while the Saudis are the face of this intervention, the U.S. is playing not only a supporting role, but for me, I think the U.S. are the prime movers in this intervention.
The U.S.-backed Saudi military campaign has caused a humanitarian crisis. What alternatives were there to military intervention?
The alternative was to continue the process of discussion that was taking place in Yemen, to provide support to the Houthis, who were more than willing to come to some kind of political agreement in order to avoid conflict and to keep the attention on what they saw and what they thought was the main enemy, in Yemen, which is in fact the Al Qaeda forces. So there was space for continued dialogue, but the Saudis and the U.S. decided that they wanted to reduce the impact and significance of the Houthi force because they tried to make the link between the success of the Houthi military success and their support, their alleged connection and support from Iran.
What are the U.S. and Saudi geostrategic interests in the region?
You know, there are a number, but they appear to be confused. Of course, Yemen is a very important strategic location. It occupies two very important, what they call choke points for the flow of oil to the west. It is a valuable piece of real estate in that sense, even though Yemen is the poorest country in the Arab world. But it's not clear what the objectives are for this bombing campaign. The Saudis claim that they want to see a reinstallment of President Hadi, but that's not going to happen, and they know it's not going to happen. So they seem to be now bent on just undermining the ability of the Yemeni society to operate as a society by targeting civilian infrastructural targets, reducing the society to a dependency.
How does the Saudi intervention fit within the larger framework of the war on terror?
It actually contradicts it. As I said earlier, when the Houthis gained control of the capital and was in the process of establishing some degree of order in the society, they had struck a deal with the Americans who were based at the Al Anan military base, where they were flying their drones against Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. But as a consequence of this invasion and the general chaos, the U.S. was forced to withdraw. And in the political vacuum, we see that Al Qaeda has launched a series of military attacks, including attacking a prison, freeing 270 of their comrades, including a very high-level Al Qaeda operative. So the regional objective of undermining the power of Al Qaeda seems to be in variance with the military activity and objectives of the Saudis and the U.S. in Yemen. Is clearly contradictory.
What are your thoughts on how the perpetuation of lawlessness and disorder in the Mideast can be stopped?
By having a clear commitment to adhering to international law, attempting to use the good offices of the United Nations to try to resolve some of these international conflicts, to take the military option out of its privileged position as being the first option and attempt to try to work out politically some of these issues.
Thanks, Amaju, for joining me on Imaginary Lines.
Thank you also. It's been my pleasure.
And now, a look at other media news. In mid-March, Latin America expert Greg Grandin appeared on Imaginary Lines, calling out Fox News' Bill O'Reilly for helping the U.S. cover up its 1980s war crimes in El Mozote, Nicaragua. Now others are also questioning O'Reilly's journalistic integrity, this time for his alleged reporting on events surrounding the 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy. In O'Reilly's 2012 best-selling book, Killing Kennedy, The End of Camelot, the reporter claimed to be an ear witness to the 1977 gunshot that killed George de Mohrenschildt, a Russian immigrant who figured prominently in the mystery of who shot JFK. De Mohrenschildt had befriended Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin of JFK, and so could have helped clarify suspected connections between Oswald, the CIA, the FBI, and other intelligence agencies. But writing in Newsweek, Edward J. Epstein, a Lee Harvey Oswald biographer, says O'Reilly's insertion suffers from a reality deficiency disorder. Epstein wrote that he was the actual and only reporter interviewing de Mohrenschildt on the last day of his life in 1977. He stated that the inventive O'Reilly may have been emulating the time-traveling investigator, Jake Epping, who went back in time to solve the JFK assassination in Stephen King's 2011 best-selling book titled 11/22/63. That's it for today's Imaginary Lines. Thanks for watching the show. I'm your host, Chris Spanos. Please join me next week